So tell
Yeah.
me what you have found, Joy.
Well, first of all, I love the fact that there's no longer a corporate sort of division that tells me I can't go on your podcast. I can just do whatever I want, and I love that. But secondly, this audience, what I really love about Substack and what I found about it, and I've had a friend, my friend Yashar, who's been telling me for years, you've got to get on Substack, you've got to get on Substack. And when I finally got on it, what I found and what I love about the Substack audience is they're focused. This is an audience that is curating itself to be very interested in very specific and particular forms of information, because it's not a broad sort of cable audience where, people are finding the shows they like. Yes, they're finding the hosts they like, but they're finding it to look at broad pieces of knowledge and information. On
Right.
Substack, it's like, if I really like, Ava DuVernay just came on. I'm very interested specifically in film, in Hollywood, in Black women in film, that very specific and unique thing. I can curate myself to get her directly and get right to her. If I'm interested in Katie Couric and her take on the world and her vast knowledge of news, and I want her specific perspective, now I can curate myself into that. And people are able to really collect for themselves and curate for themselves. It's almost like programming their own little cable network, right? But that
Right.
can be all day on your phone, direct to your inbox, and is speaking directly to you. And things like this. What we lacked on the TV side, on the cable side, is something that I used to really enjoy in radio. Because when I was in talk radio, it was one of my funnest jobs because you could talk to people. We took
Right.
calls. And
Right.
so the interactivity, I think, is the other piece. So these are people who don't just want to get information, they want to interact. And I love it.
Yes. I love the interactivity too. And, I wrote in my book, Joy, about when I was at CBS News and I was anchoring the evening news, and I was seeing how digital media allowed you to have these interactive conversations with viewers. I remember I solicited questions during the Gulf oil spill, and I said, what do people want to know? What are you all interested in? And we used them on the air. And of course, the people at CBS thought I was insane. The number two male executive, this very kind of curmudgeonly older guy, nothing wrong with older people. Hello, everyone. But he said to my producer, I think it's beneath the anchor of the CBS Evening News to be on the Twitter. And there was this attitude for so long that social media was beneath social media platforms, I should say, and using them as a conduit to share and learn and, get more information was really beneath legacy and mainstream media. And I think that's why they were so slow. I mean, this was in 2008. Well, when was the Gulf oil spill? I guess it was 2010, maybe.
Yeah.
But and I joined Twitter in 2009, and it was this huge scandal that I had even joined Twitter. And it was just, now I don't really like that platform, by the way, but it's just so funny to me. And I guess, why do you think people, and even NBC and MSNBC, I think, were quite reticent to
Very.
join, be more available on social media? Do you think it was because the corporate bosses feared cannibalizing the content and making it too readily available, and ergo decreasing ratings on the shows themselves?
100%. And I'll some two quick perspectives. I started out working in local
There's
news.
Vera Tunde.
Oh, Baratunde. Hey, Baratunde, how are you? I started out, my very first job in news is I actually worked at the Fox affiliate in Miami. So I was inside the Fox world. And it's an interesting, for that on the local, on the TV side. And then I worked for NBC, and I got this job at NBC, but they hired me as a digital editor. And this was sort of in the early years. This was 99,
Wow.
2000. And it was a time when digital was very new. And we were really bastardized inside that newsroom, I have to say. I loved all my people that I worked with at TVJ, so hello to all of you if you're there.
Oh, and I worked
But
at TVJ, by the way.
I know you did, because we very famously so. Oh, trust me, sis, you were a legend. You came, but we were like, hey, Katie Couric is working. We know that, and so we knew that there. So we're the digital side, it was first it was 6 of us, and then they cut our salaries, and it was 3 of us. We had to like fight it out for our jobs. But the 3 of us, I would be in like meetings, news meetings, and try to like chime in and pitch stories. And they'd be like, "Ew, why are you talking? Why is the digital girl talking?" And they really were against us breaking any news online. I used to try to fight with management to say, "Look, we have this amazing story. Can we break it online?" They'd be like, "No." They wanted to hold it for the 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news. They wanted to hold it for at least for the 5. They did not want it broken with the 6 o'clock. So they really would refuse. There was this one time, Katie, one of my favorite stories about this. There was a slow speed car chase where a person hijacked a mail story. You could only go but so fast in a mail truck. This man hijacked the mail truck, had the poor mailman in the truck, and was leading police on a miles long high speed chase. I was like, guys, let me live stream this. This is the best television ever. You cannot not let me live. They wouldn't let me do it. They
And they
did
didn't
not
want to, and
allow
they
it.
didn't want to break into programming to
No,
show it either.
they sure
Sounds
wouldn't. So
like an
this
episode.
thing,
Sounds like an episode of The Pit, Joy, when they
it's
stole the
crazy.
ambulance.
And so, I mean, I say that to say that once I got to, NBC, and I too joined Twitter back in 2000. I think I joined in '08 or '09, and the bosses were horrified. And anytime I would tweet anything, I would get calls. I would get, "Please get off Twitter. We hate it." They don't like that it pulls their talent and their reporters out of their control, because now you're not running what you're tweeting through standards and practices. It's giving your personality directly to the audience, which they don't like because it's no longer managed and curated by them. And they don't want people breaking news. Then this weird thing happened where, like, Twitter and social media borrowed most of their content from the New York Times, the Washington Post, and those entities realized, oh, wait, we can actually get traction breaking news because that little link is coming back to the New York Times. It's coming back
Right.
to WashingtonPost.com. It's coming back to, and the one who really got it was CNN. CNN got it before anybody. And
No, definitely.
CNN.com has far more audience than CNN. CNN, the actual cable network, is like bottoming out ratings wise. But CNN.com is dominant online because most
I
people get
know.
their CNN news from there.
I also think that there was, usually the people in management, the executives, they have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo
Yeah,
because they want to basically just ride into the sunset, and disruption is risky for them. And so I think all those things, a confluence of all those forces, Joy, really paralyzed them. But it was very frustrating to me because when I was at CBS, we would cover the primaries, we would cover conventions, and they'd have to stop at 11 o'clock for local news. And I said, why don't we continue this conversation online
yeah.
and make it available for people who have, who are interested in hearing more about what was going on at the convention or during the primary. Hey, Joy, so can I ask you a personal question?
Of course.
So
I've already talked about my perimenopause. So as you can see, I'm open to anything.
so what exactly happened at MSNBC?
What's really amazing is that I've been asked this so many times, and people think that I'm just saying it to BS, but I'm being honest with you, I don't know. Literally, Katie, my show, the ReidOut, my wonderful team and I, we won an NAACP Image Award in late in late January. And within less than a month from that, they canceled our show. Like our show, we were just like 2 weeks before I was canceled. We were we were emailing back and forward with the PR department about praising our win for the NAACP Image Award. And actually, it wasn't even in January. It was in February. It was like 2 weeks before we won 2 weeks after we won the award. It came out, we were completely blindsided to the point where when I first was told on a Friday night that this story had dropped by a guy called Dylan Byers,
Oh, right. I know
who used to work
Dylan.
for CNN and used to work with the current
Now
president
he
of the
works for
network.
Puck.
And now he works for Puck, but he's connected to the current management at MSNBC. When it dropped, at first we're like, "That's a rumor," and we weren't sure how seriously to even take it. It was on a Friday night. The following morning, I get a call from Rebecca Cutler, the president, or text saying, "Can I talk to her tomorrow at noon?" And got the announcement the following day at noon. Literally, I could not tell you to this day what was the cause? It wasn't ratings because we had just had a ratings meeting a couple of weeks before that talking about the fact that our show everybody lost ratings. I mean, everybody. The entire of
Right,
cable news
right,
on the
right, right.
non-right-wing side collapsed after the election. Our show was down less than any other primetime show. We were down, other than Rachel Maddow, we were down the least. So we were just told that we were holding on pretty well. And it's not like the ratings have gotten better, since I've been gone. So I can tell you, honestly,
But
no one,
wait,
I even
but
had my exit interview and no one has told me why I was fired. I have no
but
idea.
when Rebecca Cutler called you and said, you know, ostensibly, like, I'm sure you, Joy, you said, well, what
Why?
happened?
Yeah.
Why? And what was the response?
We're just making some changes. And it was also very scripted. It was very not, it was just very perfunctory. So I don't know. And so I was like, yeah, so I asked and we were told, I wasn't told your ratings are terrible. There's something you did. You tweeted a terrible thing. Like, I don't tweet anymore. Yeah, and we were being very careful. And I was trying to be more careful about, anything on social media because I know there was a real anxiety about social media, very much an anxiety about anything on social media. And so I don't know. I genuinely was not told why.
Well, let me ask you. So you don't know, but I'm sure because you're such a smart person, I'm sure you have been speculating internally and externally, like thinking about it, like what exactly happened here? And when you think about it, do red flags pop up and you think, well, maybe it was this, maybe it was that? And I mean, they're right? I mean, you must be speculating internally about this.
Well, I mean, you know, I try not to speculate too much publicly because, again, I can't get inside the minds of other people, but I can tell you what other people have speculated about. Um, People have speculated. There are people in the chat here saying Trump, but there are lots of people at the network who are critical of Donald Trump. I mean, and they're
I
still
mean,
critical of him. I'm assuming. So I
yes.
I don't think that's but I do know there is a lot of anxiety both there and I think in every media. We're seeing it at CBS. We're seeing it at ABC where allegedly the View hosts were told not to go so hard on Trump, where there's a push for people to, hey, do less Trump, do more entertainment, don't be hard on him.
Yeah, I
He's
read
very
that.
litigious. There's a fear of him. So I think and obviously I'm
But
not
Joy,
just
you were, I mean, let's be honest, you were no different than Nicole or Rachel Maddow
well,
or,
only in one
uh,
way was I different. I'm a black
yeah,
woman doing the thing. You know what I mean? And so I'm not different, but I'm different because in my
in terms,
personal
I was just talking in terms of your criticizing of Trump. Yeah.
100%. So I think that there's a difference for Trump in hearing the kinds of criticisms specifically out of a black woman. It bothers him in a way it doesn't bother him like anything else. He's got this sort of tick about race, and about sort of criticism coming specifically from a black woman because we've seen him lay out and dish out real abuse against black women journalists. So I think and also I did a specific thing, which was I tried to constantly unpack the racial history of the country, which is very much against the sort of Project 2025 thing. And it's something I can do in a certain capacity because of my background, because not only am I a black woman, but I come from immigrant parents who come from what Donald Trump would consider shithole countries, but that I have a take on race that is different. And then I think the other thing is I was very blunt on Gaza, which is something very uncomfortable for news organizations. Even though I am not Muslim, I'm not from the region, and there are people from the region like Mehdi Hassan who I think made people even more uncomfortable in mainstream media. But I have a very strong moral belief that that the answer to the way that you deal with an attack on your country really matters. There is a moral response, and then there is an immoral or a really a cruel response that I can't justify no matter how I try to unpack it. I can't look at um, the bombing of Palestinian children, universities, schools, hospitals, wiping out the historical memory of Palestine, wiping out all of the structural and physical history of these people in Gaza and then also in the West Bank, which has nothing to do with Hamas and white pushing people off their land, brutalizing them. I look at that and I just think as a journalist, but also as a human being, I can't look away from that. And if that doesn't make me suitable, to work in corporate media, then it just doesn't, because it doesn't change the reality of the moral catastrophe of it. And that's
Did
not just what I think. I interviewed Ehud Barak, who's the former prime minister of Israel. And he is now saying almost exactly the same thing. He said to me on the phone much harsher things that he said to me on the air about his current government. And so I had on Jewish peace activists who said much harsher things than I've said. Peter Beinart, my friend who is Jewish and is a faithful religious Jewish person. So it's like, this isn't like a thing I made up. You know what I mean? It's a
did
thing that's just real.
did you get a lot of pushback? Did you hear from your bosses and other people when you were reporting on this conflict at MSNBC?
I will tell you the two most uncomfortable topics that I've ever dealt with in journalism and that face the most managerial pushback in my entire career. And I've been, I'm a OG, so I've been around for a long time. Are the Iraq War, which drove me out of journalism. I actually quit news because I was horrified by the way that the mainstream media was covering the Iraq War, the jingoism of it, this flag pins on the collar, this attempt to sort of erase any context to Iraq's history with the United States, our interventions in the region in Iran and Iraq, and also just to pretend to believe the Bush administration that Iraq had something to do with 9/11, which it didn't. I actually quit journalism because of it. And then the other one was absolutely the post October 7 coverage of what's happening in Gaza. I've never felt more pressure. I've never felt more clear corporate discomfort with a topic. Um, than that topic. It's something that clearly makes a lot of people in our industry uncomfortable. I mean, you saw what happened with Ta-Nehisi Coates, when he just wrote a really great book, and was told that his book could be in the backpack of a terrorist. It's like, that's not true. So I don't understand it, but I've read a lot of stories about it, even it being an issue at CBS and being an issue, period. And so I don't understand it, but it's definitely an issue.
Yeah. And one of the things I know you wanted to talk about too is, in addition to the pressure that you felt covering this war, um, about sort of what we're seeing. We mentioned it briefly about The View, but ABC paying $16 million in a lawsuit. I was pleasantly surprised to see George Stephanopoulos come out very strong yesterday
Yes.
on This Week, talking chapter and verse about the corruption we're witnessing from the Trump administration. But you had the aforementioned CBS, not the Ta-Nehisi Coates thing, but I'm talking about the 60 Minutes
Yeah.
editing of the Kamala Harris interview, and Sherry Redstone simultaneously wanting to Paramount to join, or to be bought, I guess, to merge with Skydance. I get
Right.
all these like corporations
I know.
and media companies, they're all
Versant,
like
that's the
swimming
new
in my
name. Like,
and
Versant sounds like a
basically
drug company. Like, what is that?
and asking, for an apology, and then, asking to pay the Trump administration all this money. And I think you're seeing the pendulum swing a little bit back. I think there was this, what they call anticipatory obedience, and then there was
Yes.
actual capitulation. And now I saw this weekend, Joy, that it's interesting. Some of these law firms that caved to the Trump administration are now facing repercussions from corporations who don't want to work with them
That's right.
because of that. And so I think the pendulum, I sense, is slowly shifting back. And it will be really interesting to see what happens and, how this all plays out. NBC hasn't, other than telling you that you no longer had a job. I mean, I having been someone who worked for NBC for 20 years, have there been any cases of NBC capitulating to Donald Trump other than in perhaps your being let go?
So I couldn't tell you anything specific. I definitely talked to a lot of people who were there and some contributors who feel that the message is, be very careful about what you say about Donald Trump. That is something I've definitely heard from friends that still, are associated with that network. Thankfully, there's been nothing explicit. I mean, other than the attempt at one point to try to hire the chairwoman of the RNC, which didn't go over too well
Right.
internally, and trying to bring in basically a Trump hack and putting them on the air on both NBC and MSNBC. But we saw that didn't last very long because internally, led by the great Rachel Maddow, who is, by the way, a boss. Like, she's amazing, and I hope that MSNBC treats her with the respect she deserves, because she and Nicole and Chris Hayes and Lawrence O'Donnell and Stephanie Rule, and folks like Alex Wagner, who I think was not appreciated nearly enough for her incredible journalism. Ali Velshi and Ayman Mohyeldin. There's some amazing people there. I want to say that. But what we're seeing is terrifying. Big ups to Scott Pelley, your former colleague, for speaking at a graduation with truth and clarity. But what we're seeing is these
And by the
capitulations.
way, sorry to
Mhm.
interrupt, Joy, but I was going to say, by the way, getting a lot of pushback
Yes, yes,
from the Wake Forest commencement address. I haven't listened to the whole thing, but Scott Pelley has been very outspoken about what's happening at CBS and 60 Minutes. And
yes.
but it was interesting that there were a lot of people who felt like they did not want the commencement address at Wake Forest to be political.
Right.
And it's interesting. I've been watching some commencement addresses to see how
Yeah.
I've done a lot of commencement addresses. I didn't do
Same.
one this year, but it would be very interesting to see how the tone of these commencement addresses have shifted
Yeah.
and what people are saying, what they're being discouraged from saying. That would be an interesting piece for someone to really comb through those.
I agree. And I am all for a very political commencement address. I've given a few commencement addresses, and I always bring my full self into them. And I think I endorse that.
Someone
And big
said
ups.
even Kermit was criticized.
Kermit even gets, well, I mean, they don't like the Muppets because the Muppets are woke. All the Muppets of every color are equal and are beloved, and they
And
promote
it's not
diversity.
easy being green, Joy.
Which, by the way, if you all don't know, it's not easy being green. Sesame Street was created to try to bring Black and Latino kids in New York up to speed educationally because of the post-civil rights movement. They realized what they needed to close the gap. And I watched this incredible documentary called The Street, which I highly recommend. And these were all white people that created it. These were white, woke white folks created Sesame Street, and "It's Not Easy Being Green" is actually a metaphor for what it means to be Black. And this white guy that wrote this thing put himself into the mind of what it is like being a Black person, and I respect so much. I love the Muppets, by the way.
I do
All the
too.
Muppets. I grew up on Sesame Street, and I love them. And the last thing I'll say, because I do have a 10 o'clock, so I have to go. But I think that the journalists that have stood up, 60 Minutes, where I very briefly, when I was on year off college, worked in the standards and practices department, believe it or not, for Jane Ann McGettrick in standards and practices at CBS for a little while. God bless the people at 60 Minutes who are standing up. God bless The View who are still saying we are going to be who we are. If we can't speak against the president of the United States when he does something wrong, we are not a democracy. We are Russia. We are Putin's Russia. And I refuse to go quietly into that good night. I refuse. And I have my little show. You see, I got my little mug here. We're not going quietly into the good night. We are going to speak truth to power. And if Donald Trump doesn't like it, maybe he should move to Moscow.
It's really chilling, Joy, what's happening. I'm gonna let you go because it's 9:59 and you got something at 10. Listen, hopefully we can do this again. I love
Yeah.
talking to you. I've always been a huge admirer of yours and
Yeah.
just really appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you. And I send the exact same thoughts and feelings back to you, Katie. You are an icon. I appreciate being able to talk to you. And this is the beautiful thing about Substack and social media. I actually get to talk to my heroes, and I
And you get
appreciate it
to
so much.
talk and in an unedited way,
Yes.
which is
Awesome.
really liberating and exciting. Okay, it's 10 o'clock.
Freedom is good. All right.
Okay. All
Much
right.
love,
Bye
my friend.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.